Today I'm going to teach you some basic schematic symbols. First, what is a schematic? It's a simplified wiring diagram showing all of the components and electrical connections within a circuit. It's important to know the most common symbols that you will run across when looking at schematics. There are two different standards followed: the American National Standards Institute and the International Electrotechnical Commission. You will run into both of these, sometimes intermixed, so we will cover all of the common symbols for each basic part in this video. Resistors are the #1 most common schematic symbol. Potentiometers and variable resistors are just modified versions of resistors. For a potentiometer, simply add an arrow pointing down towards the center of the resistor. This arrow represents the potentiometer's wiper terminal. Next, let's talk about polarized capacitors. The ANSI version will have a curved line indicating the negative lead of the capacitor. Occasionally, they will also have a plus sign by the straight line. The polarized IEC capacitor will have a box and a plus sign near the positive side, with a straight line indicating the negative lead. The non-polarized ANSI capacitor symbol is simply two straight lines parallel to each other, while the IEC equivalent typically just shows thicker lines. Power sources can be represented in a few ways. First, we will cover DC power sources. The most common will be alternating short and long lines parallel to each other. These represent battery cells. If you have one long and one short line, represents one cell. Two of each represents any number of cells beyond 2 and requires a voltage indicator. These aren't always shown with the polarity designator, but just remember, the short line is always negative. Another DC source is a simple circle with a plus and minus sign in the center. These would be found where the power source is a desktop supply or something comparable. Very similar to the last DC source, the AC source symbol is a circle with a sine wave inside. Now let's cover separate voltage and ground symbols that represent a connection back to the main power sources we just went over. To start, we will go to Digikey.com in the Reference Design Library to view a large schematic. With so many connections in one schematic, it can become muddled and confusing to look at when all of the connections are sent back to the main power source. The following power symbols are some of the more common ones you'll see in large schematics. VDD stands for voltage drain drain, and VSS stands for voltage source source. These originated for use with MOSFETs, but are now commonly used for positive and negative power sources. Another similar set is VCC, or voltage collector collector, and VEE, or voltage emitter emitter. These are less common than VDD and VSS. These originated for use with transistors, but are now used for positive and negative power sources. The next symbol is another variation of positive and negative voltage within a complex schematic. Simple lines with an arrow on top, designated by V+ or V-. Now let's move on to ground symbols. The first two are for chassis ground and earth ground. However, they are commonly misused as signal ground connections. True signal ground connections are either a flat line or an arrow. Let's move on to diodes. These have an arrow with a line across the point. The line indicates the cathode lead. If you see a diode symbol with arrows pointing away from it, this indicates light. In other words, a light-emitting diode or LED. Occasionally, there will be a circle around the main arrow and line. Last, let's go over some switch variations. The most basic type of switch is a single-pole, single-throw switch. The connection line in the center represents the switch's actuator. This switch symbol is drawn in a normally open position. When actuated, the switch will close and complete the circuit. This symbol is another single-pole, single-throw switch that represents a push-button style actuator. Again, it is drawn in the normally open position and completes the circuit when pushed. This is a single-pole, double-throw switch, drawn with the top throw representing the normally closed position and the bottom normally open. When the switch is toggled, it flips between the two positions. The last symbol is a double pole, single throw switch, drawn in a normally open position. There are hundreds of other schematic symbols that you'll have to learn along the way, but these should get you started. Now you're ready to learn how to read a schematic.
Want to watch more videos like this? Like and subscribe.